Good evening, folks, and welcome to the live stream. I hope you're all very well this evening. Let's see who we have on tonight. We have Jared Mack. Great to see you, Jared. Hope you're well. We also have Viking President Stu of Stewland. Great to have you on, Stu. Hope you're fine tonight. Revan 1983 Witch is here. John O'Sullivan is on. EGF 1000 is on. Great to see you. Tiny Demolition Lover. Hope you're well up there in Scotland. We also have Amax C. We have David McGuinness. Make sure to check out Indie Truck Davies, the Two Davies YouTube channel. All things Scottish. We also have Bernie. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. We have Chatty Rat. Great to see you, Chatty. We also got Verti. Great to see you, Verti. Hope you're well. Reagan Elite is now a member of Discord. Yay. We also have Colin. Great to see you, Colin. Hope you're well. Woods Boy Me is here. Great to see you. Roseanne is on. Great to have you on, Roseanne. We have Killer. Thank you for moderating once again tonight, Killer. Who else have we got? The Lefty Boater. Great to see you once again. Hope you're fine. We also have Young Ralph is here. Victor is here. Frederick, great to see you. We also have Rudd once again. Hope you're fine. Richard is on. We have also Jackie. Great to see you. Who else have we got? Wim is here. Great to see you. Hugh is on. Nick is here as well. Cal, great to have you on. Hope you're well. Dr. Johan, thank you so much for that. Hope you're well. Thank you very much for that. And I have to get back to you. You had sent me a comment recently and I had to reply, so I will get back to you. Thank you very much for that. I hope you're having a nice evening. We also have John259. Great to see you, John. We have you and me. Great to see you. Asperger's Europe. Great to have you on. Hope you're well. Claudia, great to see you. Hope you're fine. Richard is here. Richard Smith. Andrew, great to have you on, Andrew. Andrew Luke. Jane, Jackie, Casper, Archangel, great to see you. Hope you're fine. Paul C. And the chat is going all over the place. So Nick is here. Derek is here. Heck God is on. Roisin, great to see you. Shiele, great to see you too. And so many more. Hope you're all very well. Hope you had a nice weekend and you're ready for another week of madness. So we'll start off with Liz Truss. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about Brexit because Keir Starmer, of course, number 3 is here. Great to see you. Keir Starmer and CGM. Hi, CGM. And a late happy birthday to you. I won't sing, I promise. Keir Starmer, of course, went over to France. The Labour Party are trying to rebuild some of the damaged relations that the Tories have inflicted upon Britain and the EU over the last number of years. So the Labour Party are working hard to rebuild those bridges, to quench those fires. So it's going to be interesting what they can achieve over the next number of years because they're still, of course, in opposition, so they can't really do that much. But anyway, so I'll talk a little bit about that. I'll talk a little bit about the economy, schools that are crumbling, of course, and porta cabins are taking over. Well, let's start off with the economy.
Well, let's
Liz Truss's economy, actually.
Ourselves what actually happened last autumn. This is showing you just how much extra borrowing, or indeed less borrowing, there was in various of the plans that we saw around that. Of course, you had all of those energy support schemes that came in. Quite a lot of money spent on those things. Let's not forget about that. But then, of course, you had the mini budget and all of these different measures, essentially cancelling tax rises, having tax cuts as well. That cost a lot of money. In fact, by the end of the forecast horizon, according to the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, they said about £45 billion, a lot of money in short. Now, part of the point that Liz Truss wants to make is that it would have been less expensive than that. She's pointed to numbers from the CEBR, their business forecast group, saying that maybe it would cost maybe £25 billion when you take into account all of the dynamic effects, so people kind of working a bit more. But you're still talking about more borrowing. And of course, what eventually happened, well, all of that was cancelled. Liz Truss resigned as Prime Minister, Jeremy Hunt came in as Chancellor, and you had this. That's basically raising money, so less borrowing, and that's painful in the coming year. That's what we're facing at the moment, so higher national insurance and so on and so forth.
So, Liz Truss presented herself as the solution to all problems. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut taxes. I'm going to get rid of the higher rate of tax. Remember, what was it? Kwasi Kwarteng says, I'm not going to reduce the tax rate, I'm going to eliminate the tax band altogether. And the markets are like, what? How are you going to pay for all of this? And they're like, we don't have a reason, we don't have a clue of how we're going to pay for it.
With less spending. But the point that Liz Truss also wants to make is that essentially, and this is quite interesting, when you look at government borrowing, okay, so this is showing you interest rates, the interest rate the government has to face, and that was the mini budget. Those interest rates went up an awful lot. People got very worried. But look at what happened afterwards. There's the mini budget. There, by the way, of course, is when Liz Truss resigned. It started to come down. It did go down, but then it's come up. And in fact, now, look, government bond rates are higher than they were during the mini budget. So does that mean essentially there's problems with the UK economy, not with Liz Truss's mini budget? Well, maybe not, because you've got to look at other things as well. You have to look, for instance, at the currency. This is the pound versus the dollar. Got to the lowest level that we had ever seen at that point of the mini budget. Now it's come up. So that's recovered. That was weaker before. Also, look at credit default swaps. This is a measure of just how worried people are about the government defaulting. You can see the Brexit vote, you can see COVID there, and you can see the mini budget. Those were all alarm signals for the
alarm signals. Brexit, the pandemic, and the mini budget, and the Tories still, along with Liz Truss supporters, continue to go around saying, no. If we had continued with Liz Truss, everything would be great. Can you imagine if she had remained in office? Can you imagine if Kwasi Kwarteng had remained Chancellor? Brad, thank you so much for that super chat. Nurse, Truss is out of bed again. It's insane. You have somebody who trashed the economy along with her Chancellor, and now she's writing a book about how to save the West in 10 years or something like that. Instead of putting your head down, leaving, abandoning Britain altogether, go and live on in the Cayman Islands or something, just drinking martinis every day on the beach. Just do something like that and leave, and don't be seen ever again. The only time we should ever hear about Liz Truss is when somebody, does some documentary about whatever happened to Liz Truss, sometime in 40 years' time, where she's, I don't know, spending the rest of her days in a nursing home or something, and, ranting about mini budgets, something like that. That's the only time we should ever hear from Liz Truss again. Not a year later, her trying to resurrect her career, her political career. And the mad thing about it is she still has a lot of support. At this meeting yesterday, this conference she gave yesterday, you had Farage at it. You had Roccaforte, the Italian guy, or of Italian descent. Maybe he's Italian, I don't remember. Anyway, he owns a hotel chain, and he had to move. He had to expand in Italy because he couldn't expand in Britain because of Brexit, and he's still a Brexiteer. Minford, what's his name? The economist, the Brexiteer economist who predicted that who rightly predicted, I think it was, that the car industry would collapse because of Brexit. But for him, it was a positive thing. It was like, yeah, to hell with the car industry. Patrick Minford. Anyway, let's move on from Liz Truss. And to immigration, Braverman stopped immigration centre inspections despite safeguard warnings. I'll do this later. Suella Braverman halted annual inspections of immigration detention centres such as Brook House last year, shortly after ministers received direct warnings that vulnerable people, including torture victims, had been left unprotected, the immigration watchdog has disclosed. Part of me always believed that Suella Braverman was playing a part. What I'll do is I'll pretend to be a racist and a bigot in order to keep the racists and bigots on board. It's not actually that I truly hate refugees and asylum seekers. I just pretend to, so that the racists and bigots, the people who do actually hate asylum seekers and refugees, will continue to support me. But actually, no, I think the veil has fallen, or the scales have fallen from my eyes, and she is actually that evil. Like she halted an inspection into that would have been there to protect, to make sure that vulnerable people were protected. In an article for The Guardian, David Neal, the independent chief inspector of borders and immigration, said the Home Secretary stopped his annual review of adults at risk held in removal centres last September. The decision came after Neal specifically warned that Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick that protections must be in place for vulnerable detainees and that necessary changes were moving at a glacial pace, he wrote. Kevin Sims, thanks so much for that super chat. Hey Max, the way the Tories and the lapdogs in the media reacted to Starmer's policies showed their fear that he's making common sense proposals the public can get behind. Yes, when it comes to immigration, you know, the right wing are going apeshit over what he's presenting, because he's saying, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to, although he hasn't specifically come out with this, but it's looking more and more likely that he's going to try and have a returns agreement with the European Union. Now, the European Union hasn't said that they would agree to that. You know, Starmer's not even in power at the moment, so they're especially not going to come out and say, yeah, we'll agree to that. And it's not guaranteed, even if he is in power, that they would agree to it. But at least he's providing something, because the Tories have kept saying, well, he hasn't a plan. How is he going to stop the boats? Well, having a returns policy would actually ease the numbers in hotels and emergency accommodation. You'd be returning people. Of course, you'd be taking in more people, but you'd also be returning more people if you had a returns policy, a returns agreement. The Tories don't have a returns agreement, so they can't return anyone, or very few people. So at least he has something. When it comes to Brexit, he said, well, the media says, he hasn't specifically said this, of course, but the media is saying that he wants to rewrite the Brexit deal. And, you know, he has said that he's critical of the Brexit deal, that it's not working, that he's going to make Brexit work. Okay, make the deal work. I prefer him to say we're going to make the deal work than make Brexit work, because you can't make Brexit work. Brexit is like, you know, a fire in your building. You're not going to say, well, let's make the fire work. No, you have to put out the fire. But anyway, make the fire extinguisher work. That's what we're going to do. But he needs to present something, because businesses are saying, okay, Brexit's not working. The public understand that Brexit's not working, so he has to say, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to try and firefight. We're going to try and undo some of the damage of Brexit where we can. Now, it's going to be very limited, and it's going to be very difficult, and it's going to take a long time to undo some of the worst of Brexit. And, you know, most of us on this channel probably, you know, agree with me when we say that the best way to resolve this is rejoining the European Union, which Starmer has ruled out completely on a number of occasions. Now, he has been flexible with his positions in the past. I think at the moment he's ruling out because he doesn't believe there's political support. I'm not saying there isn't support to rejoin the European Union. I'm talking about political. So in Parliament, there aren't enough MPs. There isn't enough consensus in Parliament to support rejoining the European Union. So it's a bit pointless outside for now. But until there's consensus in Parliament, he's not going to talk about rejoining. So when you have a Conservative Party, and it's possible that if the next incarnation of the Conservative Party could be pro-European, because all the headbangers could lose their seats, the Jonathan Gouleses of this world, the Lee Andersons of this world will lose their seats, then you'd be left with a small core of maybe moderates, people who are reasonable, you know, more moderate than the headbangers anyway. Some of those would probably hold on to their seats, and then there'd be a feeling in Parliament, well, you know, it'd be a more moderate, more pro-European wing of the party. Simon Hoare, for example, the head of the Northern Ireland Select Committee, he's pro-European. He's not a Brexiteer. So, you know, if he can hold on to his seat, and others like him, Tom Tugendhat, or who else? There's not that many of them, but there's a few of them. If they can hold on to their seats and maintain this sort of moderacy within the Conservative Party, and then in the future win seats for moderates, it's possible that the Conservative Party could be demanding that the UK rejoin the European Union at some stage. And then Labour would have to say, okay, yes, we support that as well. But yes, what he's doing is he's grasping the narrative. He's taking the initiative, and that's what he should be doing. He can't be letting the Tories write the rule book or write the narrative. He has to steal it, and I think he's been quite successful over the last number of weeks. It seems that according to polling, Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives are plummeting once again. So, Rishi Sunak is somewhere at the same level of Liz Truss last year at this stage. So unless he does something dramatic, he's going to continue to lose support. There'll always be a floor. He's not going to go down to, minus 100 or something. But he'll always have some sort of support, but it will be a core support that he can't grow. Anyway, in the article, a major inquiry revealed on Tuesday, thanks Kevin, a major inquiry revealed on Tuesday that people detained at Brook House Immigration Removal Centre in 2017 were mistreated in prison-like conditions, with staff making dehumanising and racist comments and being quick to use force. What the Home Secretary or the Home Office decide filters down. Like the rhetoric at the top, the attitudes at the top trickle down to the people on the ground level. And when it's this idea that, well, these people, we need to treat them like scum, we need to dehumanize them. If that's the rhetoric in the House of Commons, of course you're going to see it inflicted upon people in detention centres. Because if the Home Secretary is calling these people scum, then we have to do the same. We have to implement that policy. The inquiry found that people at Brookhouse were supposed to be removed from the UK. Were subjected to degrading treatment, including being forcibly detained while naked, and were caused unnecessary pain by dangerous restraint techniques. It also said homophobic comments were made against one detainee at the centre near Gatwick Airport. Neil writes, when I submitted my report to the Home Secretary in September 2022, I called for a meeting with the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, to give him the latest findings and to convey my concern about the lack of progress in making improvements to immigration detention. I said that there was a need for a foot on the ball moment and concerted effort to do better to provide protections for vulnerable detainees. Discouragingly, though I had made it clear that much more work remained to be done, my discussion with the Minister Jenrick was quickly followed by notification from the Home Secretary that she was terminating her predecessor's commission for the annual ICIBI inspection. In 2018, Sajid Javid, the then Home Secretary, asked the ICIBI to report each year on the effectiveness of the Home Office's measure to safeguard vulnerable people in detention. Why did she do this? Because it's about maintaining this hostile environment. We don't care about the asylum seekers. We don't care about how they're treated. If they're treated badly, well, that's great. We can use it as ammunition, not so much against the asylum seekers, because this information isn't going to get to the potential asylum seekers who want to come to Britain, but this is something maybe that will eventually filter down to the racists and bigots, and they'll be happy to hear that Suella Braverman is treating these people like crap and worse, or not putting in safeguards to stop these people from being treated like crap, I should say. What a horrid individual.
Places of detention are the hidden spaces in our society. As I said in my opening statement, most of us will have no experience of being incarcerated or of working in such an environment. They are places where isolation from loved ones is a fact of life, where communication is restricted, and where rights and freedoms are curtailed. Detention can take a toll on both physical and mental well-being. There is no higher role for the state than as a guardian of those who are detained and in its care. For people who do not have citizenship, their precarious status makes them inherently more vulnerable, and factors such as language barriers or poor health can intersect to make them yet more susceptible to harm. An essential part of this inquiry has been to reach conclusions about the mistreatment of detained people at Brooke House between April and August 2017, where there is credible evidence that it occurred. Specifically, my terms of reference define mistreatment as treatment that is contrary to Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which states, "No one shall be subjected to torture or inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment." Spaces and our...
Sorry, damn it, I skipped back. That's probably why the Tories and the Brexiteers and the racists and bigots want to get rid of the European Convention on Human Rights, because it protects, including asylum seekers. It protects British people, of course, as well, but it also protects asylum seekers. And they would prefer to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
It's contrary to Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which states, "No one shall be subjected to torture or inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment." I have identified 19 instances in which I consider there is credible evidence of acts or omissions that were capable of amounting to mistreatment, which is contrary to Article 3. Those incidents are discussed in detail in my report, but I will briefly set out the nature of them now. The most serious incident involved the application of pressure to a detained man's neck while he was in extreme distress. Other incidents included the repeated use of an inherently dangerous restraint technique, which has previously been associated with the death of a detained man, Jimmy Mabenga, in 2010. There were instances of men being forcibly moved when they were naked or near naked. Force was used inappropriately, sometimes on people who were harming themselves. Unnecessary pain was inflicted on men during use of force incidents. Humiliating remarks were made towards men who were self-harming or being treated for a medical emergency. Segregation was used inappropriately, and there were occasions where threatening or derogatory language was used towards men who were extremely vulnerable. In one incident, there was a failure to adequately respond to a detained man who had been found with a ligature around his neck. I also saw evidence of physical violence by staff against detained people.
Of course, this, is wonderful for the racists and bigots to hear. Wow, this is great. This is what we should be doing. This is to punish these people who are vulnerable, punish these people who come into Britain, to punish these people who present no threat. These people have not committed any crime. Not that anyone who has committed a crime should be treated like this, but if this was happening to prisoners, people in prison, you would imagine there would be alarm bells ringing. But because it's happening to asylum seekers and refugees, it's sort of swept under the carpet. And it's maybe even encouraged to a certain extent. Because the Home Secretary decided, I don't want to see any more reports. So, out of sight, out of mind. What I don't see, I don't have to read or I don't have to care about. And in a sense, the public don't have to care about either. Gareth, thanks so much for that super chat. Max, these so-called detention centres sound like budget version of the now famous Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq. Yes, fucking disgusting. It sounds, if we didn't know it was about asylum detention centre, you would imagine she was talking, or the report before was talking about, what happened in Iraq, where you had people who had no proper training being put in charge of a prison population. In this case, it's probably another case of people who have not been properly trained, being told, okay, now you have to deal with these asylum seekers. You have to detain them. You have to deal with them, deal with their problems. And of course, these people probably don't have any training or sufficient training. And if this can be also down to cuts, part of the austerity plan. Anyway, moving on, but sticking with this topic. Cost of housing asylum seekers in hotels rises to 8 million a day, says the Home Office. So instead of actually processing the claims, the price of housing people goes up. Because if the numbers keep increasing and you're not processing enough claims, then of course the backlog increases and you have to house people somewhere, so the cost of housing people is going to go up. Now, who do you think Nigel Farage and the right wing is going to blame for this? Suella Braverman? Of course not. They're going to blame lefty lawyers, they're going to blame the asylum seekers themselves, they're going to blame, I don't know, the BBC, James O'Brien, I don't know, who are they going to blame? So the cost of housing asylum seekers in hotels has risen to £8 million a day, according to the Home Office annual report. Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, had said that the figure wasn't £6 million a day when addressing the Commons on Monday. I didn't see that. So yesterday it was 6 million, now it's 8 million. Maybe she wasn't telling the truth. Ministers have promised to reduce the use of hotels to house asylum seekers while their claims are processed by speeding up the process of processing of applications and bring in cheaper accommodation on barges and disused military sites. There's a lot of resistance to the military sites, and we saw what happened with the barges. The annual report published on Tuesday states we need to stop the boats by relieving the unsustainable pressure on our asylum system and accommodation services, which is costing over £3 billion a year. The Illegal Immigration Act will ensure anyone arriving illegally can be detained and removed, and swiftly removed. No, it can't. So that people know they cannot skip the queue by coming here illegally. Now, this is the biggest and stupidest part of all of this. The stupidest part, I should say. People know that they cannot skip the queue. Does anyone honestly believe an asylum seeker who's fleeing a Central African country, saying, I want to get to Britain because I have family and friends there? Do you think that they actually know about the Bibi Stockholm? Do you think they know about, I don't know, Suella Braverman and her Rwanda policy? Or Rishi Sunak and his Stop the Boats policy? No, they don't. So I don't know how saying, well, we have our Illegal Immigration Act is going to convince people not to come. This goes further than ever before to do what is necessary to fix the issue, but legislation changes take time and there's no single silver bullet. In the meantime, we must take action to address the unacceptable cost of housing migrants in hotels, which is costing the taxpayer around £8 million a day. The government has a legal obligation to provide asylum seekers who are not allowed to work while their claim is being processed with a basic level of accommodation. They would typically only be housed in hotels and hostels for a few weeks before being moved to long-term self-catered homes. However, the increased number of people claiming asylum and the backlog of unprocessed claims has led to a growth in the use of hotels. Of course, like if you're not processing the claims, people have to stay somewhere, and they're not being moved out of this emergency accommodation into long-term housing or medium-term housing. So, of course, the bill is going to increase. And the Labour Party are attacking this. The Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, said the £8 million daily bill was astronomical. This is the price of the Conservatives' utter failure to get a grip on the issue, now costing over £3 billion a year. Shockingly, the cost of hotel accommodation has gone up by a third since Rishi Sunak promised to end hotel use. Some people are making a lot of money out of this, of course. Some of them are probably Tory donors. Some of them may not be Tory donors, but some of them are surely Tory donors, and they're making a lot of money. So this could be part of the reason why the Tories don't actually want to fix the problem. You know, if we move people into regular accommodation, then how are our friends going to make loads of money? I saw it here in Italy during, I think it was 2015. Was it 2015 when there was the refugee crisis in Europe, the last one, and there were people who were buying, disused hotels and renting them out to the government to house asylum seekers, and they were, the asylum seeker was getting something like €3 or €4 a day to live off. Like, they get food and whatever they needed, but a little bit of extra money. But for every asylum seeker you could house, you were getting something like €60 or €70 a day. And people were buying, unscrupulous landlords were, stuffing 10, 20 people into a small flat, or into 4 or 5 people into a room. and charging per person for that room, not per room, but per person, and making a lot of money out of it. These were not political donors, but it was just the governments were so desperate at the time. They had no way of dealing with this crisis. They were calling up anyone who had accommodation available, and they were paying them a significant amount. Somebody was making lots of money, as is always the case. Okay, guys. Actually, we're about halfway through the stream, so I'll just take a short comedy moment, and then we'll be back in just a jiffy with more serious stuff, Brexit stuff, after the break. Hope you enjoy this.
Colin from Portsmouth is on the line. Hello, Colin.
We're living in very dangerous times, Anthony. It's chilling. It's terrifying.
Right. How's that, Colin?
An increasing number of influential online personalities that I've based my entire worldview around have been revealed to be absolute wrong-uns.
Yes, that is rather unfortunate. Has it stopped and made you think, Colin?
Oh, there's no chance of that, Anthony. No. If anything, it's reinforced my beliefs and the beliefs of a million other completely real people who pay Elon Musk £8 a month to have 756 followers.
Yeah, I thought as much, Colin. I thought as much.
It's a bit convenient, isn't it, that all this comes out at the exact moment that Sadiq Khan expands ULEZ around Greater London and the Welsh Government introduces 20 mile an hour as the default speed limit in residential areas. It's convenient, isn't it? Oh, we've all stopped talking about them now. What a coincidence.
Colin.
There's shadowy games being played here, I'm telling you.
Some of the people you talk about being exposed as wrong-uns aren't even from the UK.
And that's
They've never been to
globalism
this
in a
country.
nutshell. Wake up, for goodness sake.
Yeah,
Thank
gotcha.
God these heroes still have their huge platforms hosted by billion-dollar tech companies so that they can keep fighting against the mainstream media. Remember the poem. First they came for the communists and I said nothing because I thought it was a great idea because I hate communists. And then they came for people who were historically a bit dodgy. And I can't remember the point of the poem, but you get the gist. And that's how powerful that poem is.
It is.
Anyway, mate, thanks for having me on. Love to the family.
Love to the family, Colin. Love to the family.
If Channel 4 had been privatised, this would never have happened.
Oh my goodness, Colin.
Come Britain.
Okay, so let's move on to Brexit. Keir Starmer, of course, in France today, meeting with the French president, trying to undo some of Brexit. And of course, the Tories are not too happy. Brexiteers are not too happy. So I just want to let you listen to a little bit of what James O'Brien said about this today.
They're on my payroll, actually. They're all secretly mustering interest in my imminent volume. It's out in 6 weeks, How They Broke Britain. One thing I was not expecting to happen, I have to be honest with you, when I even finished it not long ago, was the Daily Mail columnists, particularly the one that used to be married to Michael Gove, queuing up to announce that Britain is actually broken. And not just the Daily Mail columnists, a lot of Brexity people.
Isn't this wonderful? The Brexiteers are now saying Britain is broken. Lord Frost, the guy who negotiated the Brexit deal for Boris Johnson, is saying that Britain is broken. Tory party members who are writing articles for the Express or the Daily Telegraph or the Sun are saying that Britain is broken. You know, that it needs to be scrapped and started again or something like that. You know, these are the people who were calling anyone who was concerned about the consequences of Brexit a traitor.
People, a lot of Telegraph types. Britain is broken. Of course, they're not blaming it on the things that they've done to break Britain. They're blaming it on Liz Truss gave us a masterclass in what they're blaming it on yesterday. They're blaming it on the moonlight. They're blaming it on the sunshine. They're blaming it on the Bank of England. And they're blaming it on the boogie. Oh, and the Labour Party and the media and the BBC. Blaming it on everything, really, under the sun, except the people whose fingerprints are actually all over the unfolding disaster. So, you know things are moving when you get this. Proof you can't trust Starmer on Brexit. OK, what they're scared about now, these pearl-clutching ninnies. As Sir Keir vows to rewrite deal with EU ahead of meeting with Macron today, Tories warn he'll surrender hard-won sovereignty. So,
wait a minute, hard-won sovereignty, what does that mean? I heard it also today, people were saying, he's going to give away our freedoms. What freedoms? Like, Brexit took away the freedom of movement British people had. Like, that's not coming back unless the UK rejoins the European Union. freedom of movement is gone. Like the Brexiteers cheered its demise. They were saying, wonderful, Priti Patel delivering a speech at the Tory party conference. We have ended freedom of movement. And she gave her evil smile and was cheered. And that's why businesses in Britain are struggling to get the staff they need, because freedom of movement has ended. But it has also ended for British people who want to travel, to live abroad, to love, to work, to tour, to do all of these great things that they were able to do before Brexit. That's gone until the UK rejoins the European Union.
Two things occurred to me. The first, some idiot Tory saying wibble, 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 wobble, wibble is not actually proof of anything. A Tory saying he's thinking of being 70 is not proof that you can't trust Starmer on Brexit. Because the reason why they know that Keir Starmer would like to rewrite our deal with the EU is because Keir Starmer has told them that he would like to rewrite our deal with the EU. Oh, you can't trust him. He wants to rewrite our deal with the EU. How do you know that? He told us. That's not untrustworthy behaviour. I say to you, I'm going to go to Pret-a-Manger for my lunch, and then you find me in Pret-a-Manger eating my lunch, you can't march up to me and say, that's why I don't trust you, sitting in Pret-a-Manger, eating your lunch. That's why I don't trust you, O'Brien. Yeah. I said, I told you I was going to... How did you know I was going to be here? Well, I heard it on the radio earlier. But how can you not trust me? This is reasons to trust... All right, so that's reason number one. Reason number two is the sheer madness of simultaneously complaining about what's happened and complaining about somebody at least publicly announcing he'd quite like to make things better.
It's like saying, I'm so upset that my house burnt down. Here's somebody coming along to try and rebuild the house, and you're complaining about them rebuilding the house. Now, technically, the Brexiteers are not complaining about Brexit, but they are complaining that Britain is broken. They're saying Britain is not working anymore. The NHS is on its knees. Public services are crap. The country needs a reboot. But these are the people who are part of the problem. They're the ones who are cheering on some of the fire. Not all of the fire is down to Brexit, but a lot of it is. But these are the ones who are saying we shouldn't actually try and rebuild. Like, oh, God.
Keir Starmer was accused of a Brexit betrayal last night after vowing to rewrite the UK's deal with Brussels. These people are queuing up to complain about the UK's deal with Brussels. And yet, vowing to rewrite it is also a problem. He's meeting Emmanuel Macron, the French president, and here's the bit you weren't expecting. It's 16 minutes after 11. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, and he's wasting his time. We are now entering the period in which the Labour Party come to understand that we are not special.
And he's right. And this is the thing that I say from time to time, and I get a lot of pushback over it. I get a lot of criticism over it. When Britain left the European Union, it ceased to be a member of the European Union. And it, for a lot of people, they thought that, well, what we could do is we could get back in again and things would be like before. And it will not be like that. There are a lot of people in Britain, in Europe, including myself, who want Britain back. But there's a lot of people in Brussels who are like, okay, we don't want Britain back until it has sorted itself out. And I'm concerned that a lot of people are putting a lot of pressure or a lot of hope in a Labour government who will roll in on the first day and proclaim that, yes, we're going to rejoin the European Union, we're going to do it within a parliament, or we're going to do it within 2 parliaments, or we're going to do it within 10 years, or we're going to do it within the next 5 years. It's not going to be like... some Labour haven't said that they're going to do that. That's important to remember. But it's also a lot, and I read it online a lot, that there's a lot of enthusiasm for the idea of rejoining, and that's correct. The UK will rejoin. I'm not saying... It's just... It will take a lot of steps. It's important that the steps are taken, but they're going to be very small steps, and it's going to be a lot of them before Britain rejoins the European Union. And unfortunately, when it rejoins, it will be in a different form than it was when it was a member. So it will be different. It'll be a lot better than what's happening at the moment. It won't be as good as when things were before, because joining in 1973 or 1975 is a lot different to joining in 2025 or 2026 or 2030 or whatever it's going to be. And I think people need to remember this. It's important that there is a movement. It's important that there is enthusiasm. There's pressure put on politicians, but it's important that people don't expect more than Starmer and the Labour Party can achieve.
It breaks my heart, this, actually, because I know there's a big rejoin march unfolding on Saturday, and we'll be speaking to the rather wonderful organiser of it on the programme tomorrow. And I am not going to rain on their parade. Crikey, almost literally. There you go. That's why it's a figure of speech, isn't it? I'm not going to rain on their parade or urinate on their chips. It is an important movement espousing an inevitable outcome. But in terms of where we are now, I'd refer you to a rather splendid piece in the New Statesman today by a man who knows of what he speaks. He's a director of Euro Intelligence, Wolfgang Munchau, and he points out it is simply not possible to achieve a better deal outside of the single market and the customs union. And Keir Starmer is absolutely adamant that we're not going back into the single market or the customs union. So,
yes, but I think what Keir Starmer is saying today may not be the same as what Keir Starmer says as Prime Minister. Keir Starmer, when he's in opposition, is saying one thing. Keir Starmer, when he's in power, will say a different thing. We don't even know the outcome of the election yet. We don't know whether Starmer and the Labour Party will have a majority, whether it'll be a hung parliament, will it be a coalition, whether the Conservatives will still get back into power some way. We don't know the makeup of Parliament yet, so it's difficult to predict what Starmer is going to do and what he can achieve. Because if it's a hung Parliament, it could be a good thing for getting Britain back into the European Union, because you'd have maybe the Liberal Democrats. They would be putting pressure on Labour to speed up the negotiations, try and reach a better agreement with the European Union. Or if Starmer wins a massive majority and he doesn't need other parties to provide him the necessary means to form a government, the negotiations could tick away behind the scenes, and his focus will not be on EU membership, but will be on bread and butter issues like NHS, cost of living, housing, stuff like that. So we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, a bit more on this. Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron exchange gifts at first meeting. I was hoping that Starmer would give him a gammon. A gammon. Like say, this is what I deliver to you. Boris Johnson's head. Anyway, the Labour leader met Macron in Paris following the international junket, which had seen him glad-handing with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in Montreal. Sky News understands Keir Starmer, an Arsenal fan, gave Mr. Macron a football shirt with his favourite team colours, while a pair of cufflinks were exchanged in return. I wonder what was on the cufflinks. Speaking after the meeting, Sir Keir said the pair had a very political discussion following a lot of issues to do with global politics, but also it was that opportunity to look at future prosperity, future security, and some of the most pressing issues on the President's mind. It's not uncommon for opposition leaders to meet foreign leaders, especially ahead of an election. David Cameron met Barack Obama ahead of the 2020 election. A spokesperson for Mr. Macron said their meeting is part of a dialogue that the President of the Republic maintains with European political players. Rishi Sunak's press secretary said it's not unusual for opposition leaders to meet world leaders. Yes, it's normal, especially before an election. And of course, it makes sense because Keir Starmer is likely to be the next Prime Minister. What can Macron do for Starmer? Well, not very much at the moment, and I think it's good for them to meet. It's good for him to have a discussion with Macron, because going forward, when he becomes prime minister, he will need the support of the French president, especially if it's coming to issues like stopping the boats or whatever, immigration, but also on bigger issues, of course, like climate change and Ukraine. I think there's a possibility for the UK to play a bigger role in Europe. I think it's important also to remember that while the attitude is important, so the attitude Boris Johnson and Liz Truss had toward the European Union was quite aggressive and quite negative. Rishi Sunak a bit warmer, and of course Starmer's will be a lot warmer. And I think if he's able to present himself as pro-European to the Europeans, they'll be more welcoming to him and they'll be more willing to work with him. Now, of course, it's not going to mean that the UK is going to be able to bring down barriers to trade or whatever. There's no incentive for the EU to do this at the moment. So there'll be more cooperation, but Britain will be treated as a third country. So it's like, if the European Union say we want to have a better relationship with the United States, doesn't mean the United States is going to become a part of the European Union, but it's a competitor in some ways, and it'll be treated with respect in that matter. But I think he will be able to rebuild some of the bridges and undo some of the damage the Tories have stoked over the last number of years. But it's going to take a lot of time, and Keir Starmer's not perfect. It's possible he'll make a few mishaps along the way.
Morning, people. I came on holiday.
So, Femi, our good friend Femi, was in Paris, and he met with some French people and asked them what they thought about Brexit. I want to show you this clip.
Holiday to Paris with a mate of mine. In fact, you can just about make out the Eiffel Tower there. And it's been weird. I actually had to do an LBC interview in a 4-person hostel room, just praying to God that the other people didn't come back, and I was relying on mobile data to make it actually happen, so it was wild. And I decided to find out the opinions of some students here as to what they think of the UK and Brexit.
L'Angleterre, on aime bien. Il y a eu un long conflit avec les Français, mais en vrai non.
Et le Brexit?
Brexit, nous en soi, ça nous concerne pas trop. Enfin, je sais qu'il y a des gens, des amis à moi qui étaient dans un lycée international qui voulaient partir faire ses études en Angleterre, et c'était plus difficile du coup parce qu'il y avait moins de traités, Erasmus, tout ça, c'était plus compliqué. Donc pour partir quand on n'est pas anglais ou pas de nationalité britannique, c'était plus dur. Mais à part ça, ça a été plus dur pour les autres, pour les Britanniques en soi.
Ouais, c'est ça. Qu'en penses-tu du Royaume-Uni?
J'ai une opinion plutôt positive, voilà.
Et le Brexit?
Sur le Brexit, moins quand même. Voilà.
D'accord.
Je pense que c'est un peu comme la plupart des Français, et même des Anglais en fait, je pense. Voilà, que c'est une sorte de divorce au niveau européen.
D'accord.
C'est quand même dommage. Voilà.
Et tu aimerais bien qu'on rejoigne l'Union européenne?
Oui, quand même. Oui.
Si tu auras un message pour notre Rishi Sunak, tu dirais quoi?
Non, j'ai aucun message pour Rishi Sunak, voilà, je suis pas d'accord avec sa politique, mais bon, c'est...
Mais au niveau positif ou négatif, tu penses quoi du Brexit? Positif ou négatif?
Plus négatif en soi.
J'ai l'impression qu'en plus là, les Britanniques ils regrettent un peu leur vote.
Exactement, ils regrettent un peu quoi.
Et t'aimerais bien qu'on rejoigne ou pas?
Bon, moi je m'en fous, ouais. Alors personnellement, moi je serais pas contre.
I'm Isabel.
Isabel.
Yeah.
And where are you from?
I'm from Sweden.
Sweden, okay.
Yeah.
And what do you think of the UK?
I like the UK. I've visited London a couple of times, so
cool.
And I speak English, so I feel well integrated into the British society.
And what do you think of Brexit?
I think it's dommage, as you say in French, because we're not working with each other as much as we were before, and like as a student also I'm much more limited. I'm still European, so I'm still very privileged, but I'm more limited in a sense, and it gets very expensive. And then also I have friends that are studying there now, just to compare what it could have been in terms of cost and what it is actually. It's just dommage. How do you say dommage? A sin.
A shame.
And I think this is general. And kudos to Femi for his French. I don't speak French. Ironically, I don't speak French. My wife does, but well done to Femi. His French seems perfect.
Guillaume.
Guillaume, oui. Enchanté. Et pensez quoi du Royaume-Uni?
J'aime beaucoup le Royaume-Uni. On est cousins, la France et l'Angleterre. Donc moi j'aime beaucoup.
C'est quoi du Brexit?
Je trouve que c'est dommage. Je trouve que c'est dommage parce que l'Angleterre est un...
Notice it's always a shame. It's not we don't like the British or we don't like the English or we don't want them back or it's a regret. They seem to have more of a regret than, certainly Brexiteers do anyway. And this is important because yes, he's sampling a very small number of people here, and it's mainly young people who are a bit more open to the idea of Britain being more open to the idea of the European Union and travel and stuff like this. But it's you see the common thread here is that it's a shame, it's a pity, it would be good to have Britain back.
Un pilier de l'Europe et en sortant de l'Europe, c'est un peu dommage. Mais on a besoin de UK.
De nous.
Oui, on a besoin de vous et vous êtes puissants. Vous êtes les piliers de l'Europe et c'est dommage qu'il n'y ait plus cette facilité, cette liberté d'échange entre les marchandises, les personnes, les capitaux, etc. C'est beaucoup plus compliqué maintenant. Donc voilà.
Et t'aimerais bien qu'on rejoigne un jour?
Oui, j'aimerais bien que vous reveniez. Vous êtes dans les 6 premiers les pays fondateurs de l'Europe et donc c'est un geste fort que d'être parti, mais ça pourrait être aussi un geste fort que de revenir.
So the message I was hearing was, we love the UK, we respect the UK, and even though you made a stupid and damaging decision, we'd love to have you back.
Cette vidéo pourquoi? C'est une vidéo pour... je suis commentateur politique anglais.
Les politiques anglais, c'est une vidéo sur quoi?
Je suis youtubeur, journaliste quoi.
Allez-y, faites la vidéo.
D'accord. Vous en pensez quoi du Royaume-Uni?
Le Royaume-Uni?
Du Royaume-Uni, ouais.
C'est un peu dommage qu'ils aient fait le Brexit.
Ouais,
parce qu'on aimait bien le Royaume-Uni. Ouais. Mais c'est un peu dommage qu'ils s'éloignent de l'Union Européenne du coup. Mais on n'a rien contre le Royaume-Uni, on les aime bien, ils sont gentils. Bon, au rugby, on aimerait bien les éclater quand même si on tombe au feu.
Bien sûr.
Mais non, ils sont gentils, on les aime bien. On aime bien les Anglais.
Super, c'est gentil.
J'aime pas le thé, mais j'aime bien les Anglais.
Et vous?
Tout pareil.
Voilà. Super. Bonne journée.
Bonne journée.
Merci.
Au revoir.
And that message is echoed at the political level. For example, here's the Brexit negotiator for the EU, Michel Barnier.
The door is open. Any time. I always say that during negotiation, after negotiation, the door remains open. To be part of the single market, to be part of the customs union, to rejoin the EU.
And by some weird coincidence, Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, is here in France meeting President Macron. But he's still saying things like make Brexit work, even though the majority of the UK wants to rejoin the EU. And yes, I am aware it's raining. Now we understand that we can't rejoin the EU within the next 5 years because it takes longer than that. But negotiating our way back into the EU single market and customs union, the economic part, the thing that will actually help people with the cost of living, that can be done.
Okay, we'll have to stop there. I'm not going to go down this road again. So, look, the UK is not going to rejoin the single market and the customs union, but it should rejoin the EU, rejoin the European Union, and then that will fix a lot of problems, of course. I'm not going to get it. I got a lot of pushback over that already. Okay, let's move on. So, once again, well done to Femi for a wonderful video there, and congratulations on its French. It sounds really good. Sharp rise in number of schools in England with collapse risk concrete. So the rack problem has not gone away. Crumbling and potentially dangerous concrete has been found in 174 English schools, 27 more than had previously been known, as ministers face criticism for a slow response to the crisis. As it emerged that only 11 schools had temporary classrooms in place out of at least 29 that required them, the Education Secretary Gillian Keegan said some pupils had told her they prefer to be taught in portable cabins. Yes. A total of 250 temporary units have been ordered to help schools unable to use certain areas. And it's not just classrooms, it can also be gyms are closing because there's a risk. And this, of course, you can't have a gym, you can't use a porta-cabin. You can't turn a porta-cabin into a gym. There's also staff rooms are affected. So it's not just... There's a real fear here that this will become not a short-term solution, but a permanent solution. Because the Tories, of course, are not interested in rebuilding schools, especially 1 year before a general election. They're going to say, just let Labour deal with that. and they allow us to criticise Labour from the sidelines, saying that why aren't you building more schools? Look at our schools are crumbling. In a revised list of the schools affected by reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete, RAC, the first official government update on the crisis in a fortnight, the Department of Education said 23 schools were having to use a mix of virtual and in-person learning, 3 more than before. However, only 1 school has been forced to entirely to use remote learning, down from 4 in the initial list, and none are completely closed. MPs on the Education Select Committee criticised the Department of Education's response to the problem, with one saying the department has shown a computer says no attitude, quibbing over requests for small amounts of funding and being slow to provide mobile classrooms. Yeah, we saw that on a Newsnight report there last week, where a head of a trust was saying, I need to rent these porta cabins myself, and it covers me for 12 weeks. Then what happens? And it's costing about £500,000. She didn't know whether she was going to get compensated from the Department of Education, and it seems that the Department of Education has been quibbling over these requests, saying, oh no, we don't want to give you money. Okay. Permanent Secretary at the Department of Education, Susan Ackland-Hood, revealed that almost 250 temporary classrooms had been ordered by schools affected by RAC, but so far just 11 of them are in place. So 11 out of 250. She said considerably fewer than 250 might eventually be needed. Mark Francois, the Conservative MP for Rayleigh and Wickford in Essex, which has 53 schools affected by RAC, claimed some head teachers with schools affected by RAC had to use their own money to pay for vital items. The Tory MPs are coming under a lot of pressure because, a big problem for the Tory MPs is that they don't decide which schools are affected. And if kids going to these schools are affected, then they're going to tell this to their parents, and the parents are going to call their MP or write a letter to the MP. It doesn't matter whether it's a Labour MP or a Tory MP, that MP will have to do something about it, or at least be seen to do something about it. He said one primary head teacher in his constituency was challenged over the cost of a £50 whiteboard. I need to buy a whiteboard for this porta cabin, and the Department of Education says, why? We're not going to give you that £50 back. And Hockley Primary School, which found out about RAC in its building earlier this year and had been promised 8 temporary classrooms from the 4th of September, had now been told that they would not arrive until mid-November. So what are the kids supposed to do? Study in a tent? Do virtual classes until November? See, the problem here is that the Tories don't have any planning. They don't have any resources put aside for, okay, whenever there's what if there's massive flooding or some sort of natural disaster? Surely you have to have some money put aside for emergencies like this. This, of course, is something that they could have predicted. They were told back in 2018 that this is a major problem, and what did they do since then? They did pretty much nothing. And a big problem is you have every friggin' 3 months you have a new education minister, a Secretary of State. They keep changing all the time. So the one who's in at the moment would probably say, well, what's the point in me doing anything? I'm going to be kicked out after a bit, and somebody else is going to take over. So why should I actually do some work when I'm not going to be around to see the fruit of that work? Can you imagine if somebody was trying to work like this in the private sector? I'm not talking about privatization or I'm not comparing the private sector with the state, but I'm talking about ministers. Imagine a manager in a company who was like, I'm not going to actually bother to do anything because I'm going to probably be moved on in a few months' time, so I'm just going to spin my wheels until I'm moved. You wouldn't last very long. Daily Blasé is on the stream. Great to see you on. Hope you're well. Anyway, moving on. Keep an eye on the time. Steve Barclay criticises increased militancy of NHS strikes as consultants walk out. Like Steve Barclay. Health Secretary Steve Barclay has criticised the increasing militancy and politically motivated strikes, yes, because they are not getting what they need. See, this, the language you're going to hear from the Tories is like, oh, the train drivers earn a lot of money. Consultants earn a lot of money. They have no reason to go on strike. But if they're not earning sufficient money, they'll go and work in the private sector where they'll earn more money. So if you want to maintain that, it's not just about the money, it's about maintaining that. If their workload is too much and they don't believe the pay that they receive is sufficient to cover that workload or those working conditions, they're going to leave. They'll either go and work in the private sector or they'll go and live abroad. Like we saw with nurses saying, actually, if I move to Australia or Canada, I'm treated better, I earn more money, and the conditions are better. It's not just only about money, it's also about conditions. But of course, the Tory minister, be it transport, be it health, whatever, will say, it's about money. Look at these consultants, they're on 80, 90, 100,000 pounds a year. They have no reason to be complaining, to be going on strike. The government is consulting on adding requirements for medical staff to provide minimum service levels during strike days. Okay, these minimum service levels, and what you hear from what's his name, Steve Barclay and others, is that, well, like in Europe, they have these minimum levels. Yes, but they have sufficient staff. The problem at the moment, because of Brexit in part, is because the NHS don't have sufficient staff. So they can't have a minimum service level all the time. Like, the idea of a minimum service level is nothing to do with strikes. It's like, we should always have this minimum service. But they can't actually have the minimum service even when they're not striking. This is the thing that's left out in most discussions. You can't have a minimum service level just for strikes. You have to have it all the time. But you can't have it all the time because there is insufficient staff to have a minimum service level. So this is like a sort of trick that the Tories are playing with the public. It's not so much with the consultants or the NHS staff, it's with the public. They're saying what we're going to do is bring in these minimum service levels for the British people, for ordinary people who need health services. And it's a trick because there aren't minimum service levels at any other time. Like, if the Tories believe in it, they would bring it in permanently, but they're not. They're saying we're going to bring it in for strike days or whenever there's a strike. Speaking to Sky News, Mr. Barclay said that the Christmas Day service level provided on strike days did not get the balance right. He said, we've seen this escalating, increasing militancy and criticising the strikers, not actually saying, okay, what can we do to fix the problem? He just criticizes. It's always about pointing the finger and saying, it's not my fault, it's their fault. It's the union's fault that the NHS is collapsing. It's the union's fault that you can't get your NHS appointment or you can't get your hip replacement. Nothing to do with us, who've been running the system into the ground for the last 13 years. Anyway, including with the Conservative Party conference to refuse exemptions that would have been agreed locally by their own representatives, as we saw in some cases in August. Well, you could cancel the party conference now. Is it that important? Like, there should be a minimum service levels during the Conservative Party conference. Who gives a flying F about the Conservative Party conference when a bunch of nobodies and lazy layabouts and I was going to say scumbags, but I better not. Just meet in a room in a conference for a few days to kiss each other's arses and say and claim how wonderful they are. And of course Liz Truss will turn up, and Boris Johnson may, give a chin wag virtually because he couldn't be bothered to get off his arse and actually get there. And Rishi Sunak will say how wonderful things he has achieved, like stopping the boats and rebuilt the NHS and cut inflation, all this crap. Scroungers conference, yes. It's about trying to remain relevant. Junior doctors who are striking during the government's party conference are calling for a pay restoration to 2008 levels. How is that equivalent to a 35% rise? Consultants are looking for an above inflation pay rise. Like, they're just asking for it to be restored to 2008 levels, not we want to make loads of money. And it has to be above inflation. Otherwise, what happens, which the Tories never mention, is that if you can't pay people enough, they'll move into other sectors. They'll move into the private sector, or they'll leave the country altogether. You know, you can only rely on vocation for so long, but vocation doesn't pay the bills. Vocation doesn't maintain a standard of living. Like, why should consultants be expected to, you know, we're talking about people who earn a lot of money, okay, but they have been studying a lot, they have been working their way up to that level. It's not like, you know, they just graduated from university and became a consultant. It takes years. And they have a lot of responsibility, a huge amount of responsibility. They literally decide whether people live or die. So if you want to maintain them, you have to pay them enough. I don't know how much enough is, but the health secretary should know. Minimum service levels for MPs. Well said, Gareth. Yes. That's what we need. Minimum service levels for politicians. Where would Nadine Dorries fit in there? Or has she, she already resigned? Yeah, a year and a half or something after her last. Can you imagine not turning up for work in a year and a half? There was a scandal some years ago where people were in Italy. It was over 10 years ago, I think it was. Where thanks so much, Gareth. Where people were coming into work and because you had a card to scan when you came into work, and colleagues were taking cards of their friends and they would scan the card so it would make it look like their colleague had come into work that day. And then, so for example, I and Nightbot, okay, I'm not going to pick on anyone here. So I and Nightbot worked in the same department. So I say to Nightbot, look, here's my card. You scan me in tomorrow to make it look like I've come into work, and I'm going to stay at home and, I don't know, go home. I go out and do some shopping, or maybe go to the beach or go to the mountains, go for a hike or something. And I'll still get paid because you have scanned me in and you've clocked me in and clocked me out. That went on for a long time. And of course the managers knew about it, but they couldn't be bothered to do anything about it. But it's a bit like that with politics. You know, how is it that Nadine Dorries was able to draw a salary every month or whatever politicians are paid for over a year and not actually do anything? She didn't even speak to her constituents. Her constituency office was closed, it seems. How dare you pick on Nightbot? To hell with Nightbot. He knows what he signs up to when he joins this. Or she. I don't remember. Anyway, guys, let's move on. Pretty serious problem here. So I've said before, this is an issue related to Ireland, so I hope I'm still holding on to some people before we ended the stream tonight. But I wanted to touch on this story. This is very serious because, when a country is struggling, it shouldn't put health and education second. But when a country is thriving, when its GDP is through the roof. Now, Ireland, even if you strip out Ireland's GDP, is the highest in Europe. Now, but if you even strip out the American companies, how much like Apple and Google and Facebook and all these companies that are making huge amounts of money in Ireland, but even if you were to strip out those companies, Ireland is above average in the European Union. So it doesn't have an excuse not to invest in health and education. And unfortunately, it seems the government over the last 13 years, that rings a bell, doesn't it? I think it's about 13 years. Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael have been in government, and health has gone down the drain. It's getting worse and worse. And here's a very difficult story. I just want to inform you. This is very concerning. It's very worrying. It's a heartbreaking story about a man whose child has spina bifida. and he talks about the pain his child is going through because the child can't get the surgery he needs. Sam Priest, great to see you on the stream. Max, thanks for the Cappelletti. And I have to speak with you. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to do it, Sam Priest, and I promise you, as soon as I can, we'll sit down virtually and put out Sam Priest. I met with Sam Priest recently. A great chat we had, great discussion we had, and it'd be great to have him either on the Sunday roast, but it'd be great to have a chat with him and put out a video about a unique experience somebody has as a direct result of Brexit. Not the typical experiences that we've been hearing about, but something truly unique. And it'd be great to have him on. And I keep saying I'll do it, and I promise I will sort it out, and I'll show you that. Anyway, thanks so much, Sam Priest. Let's get to this. This is about a man describing a situation in Ireland.
One of the other consequences of this, of course, is that surgeries have been delayed and postponed and in some cases cancelled in Temple Street Hospital. And that's why I want to bring in Stephen Morrison. Now, Stephen, you're very welcome tonight. Thank you for coming in to us. Your 7-year-old son, Harvey, has a spina bifida and scoliosis. And I should say his case isn't in this review, isn't part of the current review, but he has been impacted by this because he was supposed to have his surgery and it was postponed and delayed because of this.
Yeah, so the first time that we were told that Harvey was going to have surgery was in January 2020. And it has always been pushed down the road. Obviously, COVID had happened at the time, so, you know, like everyone else, we thought that we'd give the hospital their space to do what they needed to do. In 2022, we were verbally told that Harvey would have that surgery in August, and in 2023, March 2023, we finally got a date for that surgery, for April 2023, and then it was cancelled abruptly, and we've had no information from the hospital on why.
And I think we can see a photo of Harvey there, and we can see obviously the delay is having a physical impact on Harvey. Tell me what his situation is like now.
I have to watch my son go through horrific pain every single day of his life. Every single day. And we get nothing back from the HSE. We get nothing back from CHI. We get nothing back from Temple Street.
His issue is, as we say, scoliosis, a curvature of his spine, and that is getting worse with every passing week.
Yeah, so Harvey for years has been in and out of Temple Street with pneumonia because his ribs are crushed in his lungs currently, and
I know. Just today's news then, on top of you living this every single day with Harvey and you're waiting for word of surgery, when you heard what happened, what came out today?
Shocked. Absolutely shocked. And I want to know how it happened, how this was able to happen, and when it's going to be sorted. Because that child has waited for 7 years to be fixed, and nothing has been done. There's been no intervention for my son.
This is obviously the hospital that you're depending on.
I have no trust in the hospital anymore. I don't want my son to be treated in Temple Street anymore.
But presumably you won't be given that choice.
Probably not. And me and my partner have talked about leaving the country.
I'll just say, we wish you the very, very best. I think any of us can see pictures of Harvey and just your heart would absolutely go out to you. So the very, very best to you.
Thank you.
The very best.
That's what I said. It's like, what is the point in having a state? What is the point in having a government if it doesn't look after the health and education? In this particular case, of course, the health of its citizens. And we're not talking about a country that's on its knees. We're not talking about a country that is struggling to pay its bills or pay its debts. Ireland has one of the highest GDPs in Europe. And even, as I said, when you strip out the American companies, what they add to GDP is still above average. So what is the excuse here from the government? They can't say we don't have the money. Of course they have the money. There's always been issues with healthcare, and I really don't. And I'd love to speak with somebody who works in the HSC, the Health Service Executive, which is like the NHS. I'd like to speak with somebody about this because I still don't understand. I've been hearing about this for years, decades almost, while people have been treated on trolleys because there aren't enough beds. Why aren't there enough beds? Well, there aren't enough staff. Why aren't there enough staff? Well, because the nurses aren't paid enough. Then why aren't they not paid enough? Why isn't the state investing in the staff necessary, providing them with a good salary, retaining them? Because there's also the issue of the cost of living, where nurses and doctors can't afford to live in places like Dublin, and they're emigrating because they literally can't afford to live in Dublin. They can't afford to pay the rent, or their mortgages have gone through the roof. So they just can't get on the property ladder. So they decide, look, to hell with this, I'm moving abroad. Now in this situation with this man with his son, he's desperate. He needs the child needs treatment. Because if it's not treated, it's just going to get worse and worse. And as he's pointed out, there's issues with pneumonia, whatever. This has to be dealt with immediately. What is the excuse from the government? And if the government are not able to fix these problems, then they need to step aside and allow somebody else in. This is more than politics. This is more important than politics. Unfortunately, political parties will ignore this and say, well, what's more important is we are in power. We don't want Sinn Féin in power. We don't want the other parties in power. We have to be in power, because Sinn Féin may actually help these people, or maybe not, I don't know. But let's at least give them a crack at the whip, because this is unacceptable and this is not sustainable. Anyway, guys, sticking with the cost of living in a sense, this is probably something that
and a few examples.
Most people have probably experienced. This is a little bit lighter, or maybe not. Let's see how it goes.
To share with you, like a standard multi-pack of, there they are, Penguin biscuits. You used to get 8 bars in a pack. Now there are 7. That is a 12.5% reduction in size, while the retail price has stayed the same.
So this is what they've been doing. This is what the companies have been doing. Okay, well, we can't increase the price. So what we'll do is we'll make the pack smaller. We saw it, if you compare a Snickers bar, like from 20 years ago with Snickers bars today, like the one today is like half the size. Maybe not half the size, but at least 2/3 the size of the one from like 20 years ago. Because so the object has got smaller and it has maintained the price, or the price has actually increased.
Also with butter, small pack of Lurpak used to be 250 grams, it's now 200 grams. The difference between that's a 20% reduction in size. Now, one supermarket in France has started alerting customers about products affected. If you look closely, you can see that sign. That's appeared on some of the shelves. It says shrinkflation. This product has got smaller. The price charged by our supplier, though, has gone up. And the Labour MP, Andy MacDonald, who sits on the business...
So what is the future here? You end up going to get something like, the little butter that you get in the B&B or on the airplane. It's like the little tub. It's about 3 centimeters by 3 centimeters. That's what you're going to find in the future, and be like, do you remember when the butter used to come in a tub that you'd have to hold in 2 hands? Now it's in the size it can fit on your finger.
Business Committee in Parliament thinks that should be replicated here. He says supermarkets in the UK could do what Carrefour do, inform their customers when manufacturers shrink goods and keep prices high. He also claimed that it's evidence of manufacturers exploiting customers. So what do shoppers here think? We spoke to some of them in Manchester.
You do notice the prices going up and the volume getting smaller, and the bit that I find most cheeky about it is they'll keep the packs the same size, so it looks like it, fill it with air and basically trick you into thinking there's more in there than there is.
You feel a little bit as if you're being deceived, rather than just putting the prices up. Prices are staying the same and things are getting smaller, obviously. So it does feel a bit deceptive.
Oh, okay, it cut off there. Okay, no, I was expecting a bit more from that, but yeah, so it is deceptive, and it's a way of tricking people, really. About okay, let's continue to give people either the same size packaging with reduced content, or just reduce the size of the package completely and the content. We're almost at the end of the live stream, guys, but I just want to finish with one final story here. Lough Neagh, SDLP tables Stormont recall petition to address ecological crisis. So Lough Neagh, which is actually the biggest lake in Europe, I think I'm correct in saying that. It's the lake in the centre of Northern Ireland. It's suffering from an ecological crisis at the moment. And the SDLP, which is a moderate Irish Nationalist Party, has tabled a petition to get Stormont back up and running to deal with this crisis. This would, of course, force the DUP, who have refused to go into to restart the executive over the Northern Ireland Protocol and the Windsor Framework. It would force them to do something about it. But because the DUP don't believe in climate change, you have headbangers like Sammy Wilson and Edwin Poots in that party, it's unlikely that they will actually listen to this. Like, they don't care about, the health crisis in Northern Ireland, that people are struggling to pay their bills, and that, if the executive was up and running, it could actually alleviate some of those problems. I don't see the DUP actually coming back because of an ecological crisis. They don't actually believe in climate change. So, it's an attempt to force the DUP to do something. But, well,
I think the important message is also not to neglect the small lakes, and really we could be losing a lot of them in a very, very short time, because people tend to just think of average temperature increases and things like that, but it's averages hide a lot of things, and we can see there that there are now long spells without oxygen. That has a huge impact on those systems. I've been I've been at the Maritime Festival there in Belfast, and I've been telling people that algae per se are a good thing because they provide half the oxygen that we breathe. Forests get all the credit, but actually there's an underwater forest, especially in the sea, that we all depend on. We've made it a bad thing by adding all those nutrients and leading to those blooms. But in general, they're part, and a very relevant part also for fish, very relevant part of the food web.
The most depressing part about climate change is that we're doing it to ourselves. We're destroying the planet for greed. There's no real rational justification for any of this. It's about, people want to make money out of something, be it fossil fuels, be it about, over fertilizing the soil. It's about making a profit, and we're slowly poisoning the planet, and it's our home. It's like, it's not some other planet that we're destroying. It's our home that we're destroying, and we just don't give a crap, or we don't give enough of a crap to do something about it. Like, climate change should be the central issue. And instead, we're talking about small boats. We're talking about Brexit. I respond to these things because this is what people seem to think is important. But these are not really that important. What's fundamentally important is the planet that we're on at the moment and the damage we're doing to it. And we don't have to. We could fix these problems if we truly wanted to. But unfortunately, there's no money in that. And if there's no money in it, then there's no incentive. It's the problem with capitalism. If there's no money to be made in it, no one is really interested. We need to make wind energy sexy, or we need to make it financially viable to clean up the environment. This is, it can't be some vocation. It can't be doing it out of the goodness of your heart or concern for the environment. There has to be some sort of profit motive. And on that on that depressing note, we'll finish the live stream for tonight. Before we finish, of course, we have our one for the road for a comedy video from Matt Green. So that should lift our spirits somewhat. So I want to say thank you so much to everyone who came on tonight. Thanks for your super chats. They're greatly supported. Thank you for supporting the channel that way. Thanks to everyone for smashing the like button, and thanks to the moderators for doing a wonderful job. Before we finish, we have this comedy video. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. It's about Liz Truss.
In a shock move, Blink new Mr Prime Minister Liz Truss chose the anniversary of her disastrous mini-budget to make a speech in London. Our brass-neck, tin-eared and Audacity correspondent, Jonathan Goodenough, has more. Yes, that's right, the most recent Prime Minister, likely to be a pointless answer by the end of the year, took to the stage at the Institute of Government to give her view on what happened just 12 months ago. And what form did her apology take? She certainly didn't apologise, and in fact plugged her book quite a lot, but at one point she did confess that she'd not just tried to fatten the pig on market day, but she tried to rear the pig, fatten the pig and slaughter the pig on market day, which shows that her love of pork markets even extends to metaphors. Okay? Yes, she insisted that people voted for change in 2016 and 2019, and she was simply trying to deliver that. So was she a Brexiteer? No, in fact, before the referendum, she said that I don't want my daughters to grow up in a world where they need a visa or permit to work in Europe, or where they are hampered from growing a business because of extortionate call costs and barriers to trade. And how about now? She thinks Brexit was a great idea because it didn't cause any disruption. Wow. Indeed, and I think it's worth pointing out that if people were voting for change, they probably weren't hoping for it to take the form of doubling their mortgage costs. What else did she say? She claimed that UK debt has quintupled since 2005 and is set to trop £3 trillion in the next 3 years, and can make it clear that those are direct quotes. Right. And in essence, she claimed that her brilliant supply-side reforms had been crushed by a consensus built up since 1997. And what is that consensus made up of? The markets, most of both political parties, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, Joe Biden, wokeness, climate change, diversity, London dinner parties, Princess Diana, French cheeses, and objective reality. I see. She then finished her speech by listing a series of policies, including cutting benefits, abandoning environmental regulations, and cutting windfall taxes, saying that politicians need to do the right thing even when it's unpopular. Although I think she might have meant to say right-wing thing. So will this speech return her to the front line of politics? Probably not, but these days it's hard to be sure, which may be the most terrifying thing of all. Thank you, Jonathan. Next up, as a TV personality denies all wrongdoing after being accused of sexual impropriety in a painstaking investigation, we speak to a number of men who say they're delighted that sexism and misogyny are solved now, and we absolutely don't need to look into any of their work colleagues because they're good guys and never made them feel uncomfortable. In a shock.
So guys, have a great week. I'll see you on Friday, same bad time, same bad channel. And as always, stay safe, take care, and good night.